You are now listening to Mark's Unexplained World by Mark the Medium, available on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Prime, Podbean and most other podcast platforms. Tonight's episode is about Father Hans Schmidt, the evil priest. With graphic details from the very start of the show, listener discretion is advised. So it's over to you now, Mark, for this week's incredible sermon.
Hans B. Schmidt, who was born on the 18th of February back in 1881, was a German Catholic priest, rapist, convicted murderer and suspected serial killer. Both sides of Hans' family had a long history of mental illness, and from his early childhood he was often beaten by his father and regularly watched his father beat his mother. Also, during his childhood, Hans Schmidt would combine a deep religious devotion with bisexual promiscuity and a fascination with drinking blood and dismembering animals. Later, in his adult life, as a Catholic priest during parish assignments in the villages of Bruegel and Seligenstadt, Hans Schmidt molested many altar boys, had affairs with several women and consorted with prostitutes. And, apart from all these heinous crimes committed by Hans B. Schmidt, further investigations revealed that he also had a second apartment where he had set up a small counterfeiting workshop. Once arrested during Schmidt's first trial, he pled not guilty to these crimes by reason of insanity, with his defence team accordingly using his bisexuality and claims of hearing voices as proof of their client's psychosis. He was eventually executed at Sing Sing prison in the New York state for murdering and dismembering a pregnant woman, making him the first and only priest to be executed in the United States. Greetings, Unexplainers. Thank you for tuning in once again and listening to this rather dark episode of Mark's Unexplained World. My name is Mark Hughes. I'm a paranormal investigating medium, an oracle card reader, ufologist and a true crime buff. And just to give you a better idea of who I am and what I actually do, every Monday night, though occasionally on a Tuesday, allowing for bank holidays and busy weekends, I do a podcast on the many wide and various subjects that fall under the Unexplained banner. These include ufology, hauntings, disasters, and all sorts of paranormal phenomena, including true crime, unsolved crime, and the many missing people that often go unnoticed. So if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review and a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you are listening on any other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. In this episode, I'm going to tell you the disturbing story surrounding Father Hans Schmidt, the evil priest. And this week's necessary disclaimer. This story is a tale that sadly involves both child abuse and murder, so may prove upsetting to some. You listen at your own discretion. And as usual, all opinions and comments are strictly my own, but the facts of the case remain. I also apologise if I pronounce anything incorrectly. My English, although it is my first and only language, sometimes it is so bad that when I talk in my sleep, no one understands a word of what I'm saying. So, back we go to the story. Hans B. Schmidt was born on the 18th of February in 1881 in the Bavarian town of Aschaffenburg, if I've pronounced that correctly, with his father being a Protestant and his mother a Catholic, and with both sides of his family having a long, long history of mental illness. From an early childhood, Hans Schmidt was regularly beaten by his father, and in turn he regularly watched his father beating his mother. From an incredibly early age, Hans Schmidt combined a deep religious devotion along with bisexual promiscuity, a fascination with drinking blood, and a passion for dismembering animals. One example of Hans' dismembering of animals phase is that, according to a few of his relatives, he once beheaded 2 of his parents' geese and then kept the severed heads in his pocket. And unlike most young boys of that time, who were either, playing with train sets or reading comics, young Hans Schmidt would instead often frequent the village slaughterhouse, where he would watch the death and dissection of many farm animals with a rapturous fascination. Hans Schmidt, along with his sinister hobbies and interests, was also entranced by Roman Catholic rituals and often played at being a priest with his very own homemade altar. These 2 childhood passions of his, i.e. the animal mutilations and his religion, would eventually converge in a very unsettling way, as we will find out later. At 25 years old, in 1904, Hans Schmidt was ordained in Germany, where he then spent the next 4 years serving the church. However, disputes from his superiors led to him being transferred to another church, which was just the beginning of all of his confrontations and relocations.
How come?
Well, you see, many who knew Hans Schmidt had serious doubts about his moral and mental fitness to serve as a Catholic priest. Hans Schmidt himself had made claims that he was ordained by Bishop Kirstein of Mainz on the 23rd of December 1904, and in a later conversation with the Manhattan alienist, he recalled, and I quote, "The bishop ordained me alone. I do not like to speak of it. The real ordination took place the night before. St. Elizabeth, she ordained me herself. I was praying at my bedside when she appeared to me and said,
'I ordain you to the priesthood.'
There was a light during her appearance. I told no one. I thought it best to keep to myself. They would make fun of me. They always make fun of me for these things. They always expect others to do as they do. God speaks to different people in different ways." On an interesting side note here, an alienist or alienism is an obsolete term once used for psychiatry and the study and treatment of mental illness. In the early 20th century, the term alienist itself was replaced by the term psychiatrist. During Hans Schmidt's parish assignments in the villages of Burgel and Seligenstadt in Germany, he molested various altar boys, had affairs with several women, and consorted with the multitude of prostitutes, often of which was going unnoticed or even unpunished. In fact, the only complaints from both parishioners and fellow priests about Hans Schmidt to the Monsignor and the Bishop were about his eccentric sermons and the strange and creative ways in which he was giving Mass, with these complaints eventually leading him to be transferred again. However, when it became clear that no other parish assignments in Germany would be forthcoming, Hans Schmidt then emigrated to the United States. Once in the United States in 1908, Hans Schmidt was first transferred to St. John's Parish in Louisville, Kentucky. However, he wasn't there very long, because soon after his relocation, he began to bump heads with the Louisville Catholic leaders and was forced to relocate, yet again, only this time to St. Boniface's Church on the east side of Midtown Manhattan. But he was not the only recent addition to St. Boniface Church, because at the same time, a young Austrian housekeeper named Anna Müller had recently been hired to keep shop. After this first short break, in part 2, we will look at the relationship between Hans Schmidt and the new housekeeper, Anna Müller.
This show is brought to you courtesy of Neil Packer and the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre. Find them online at www.hauntedresearchcentre.com or at 9 to 11 Regent Street, Hinckley, LE10 1AW. Open on Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. for guided tours of the haunted rooms at just £3 per person. Booking is essential at all times, and over 16s only, please, unless accompanied by an adult. The haunted rooms are extremely haunted, and paranormal activity could and has taken place at any time. Some areas and particular objects or items can be quite scary and unnerving. Membership is available for £25 to qualify for selective offers. And why not download the app, available on both iOS and Android for only $3.99, to keep up to date with what is coming up at the centre.
I did try to find some bio for Anna Müller, but unfortunately there isn't a lot available. All I could really find out is that she was born sometime in 1892 in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which is now of course known as Austria, that she emigrated in 1910 or thereabouts to the United States, and unfortunately that she died on the 2nd of September 1913 at just 21 years old. Details of which I'll go into later on during this show. In New York City in the year of 1912, Hans B. Schmidt, the priest, met Anna Müller, the housekeeper, at the rectory of St. Boniface Church. In his conversations with his alienists, or psychiatrists, Hans Schmidt claimed to have heard a voice from God that ordered him to love Anna. At first, Anna Müller refused his advances, but over time she weakened, and eventually they both began having a secret sexual relationship. Must be a staying power, I guess. Because it appears that at the beginning of December in 1912, Hans Schmidt was also having a secret homosexual relationship with a New York City dentist named Ernst Murray, with whom he also operated a counterfeiting ring. No jokes about rings, please. This is a family show. Anyway. In a later interview with his psychiatrist, Hans Schmidt claimed that he enjoyed sex with Ernst Murray more than he did with Anna Müller. Despite this secret affair between Hans and Anna, Schmidt's pattern of relocating continued, and he was moved again to St. Joseph's Church in West Harlem. One of the possible reasons for the transfer at this time could be that the church found out about the couple's affair and saw it as the best way to keep the news from getting out. I mean, it's not like the church to cover things up, is it? Anyway, I continue. Distance could not stop the two lovers, and despite his subsequent transfer to St. Joseph's Church in Harlem, Hans Schmidt and Anna Mueller continued with their secret sexual encounter. On the 26th of February 1913, Hans Schmidt and Anna Mueller got married in a secret ceremony that Hans himself performed. Of course, I think it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway in case you didn't know. Catholic priests are in fact banned from ever getting married, let alone having a sexual affair with anyone. And while Hans Schmidt wrote both their names on the marriage certificate, he told Anna, his new wife, that for her, he was about to leave the priesthood. During a sexual encounter with Anna on the high altar of St. Joseph's Church, Hans Schmidt received what he claimed was a command from God telling him to sacrifice her. And, according to Schmidt, this command was repeated so insistently that he told Anna, who, as a response, just called him, and I quote,
"Crazy."
It was soon after this event that Anna informed Hans that she was pregnant, and upon hearing him hearing this news, he knew that his days as a priest would be over if word got out that an allegedly celibate Catholic priest had married and impregnated a woman. So, in this September of 1913, 31-year-old Hans Schmidt decided to end his relationship with the 21-year-old Anna Mueller. And on the night of the 2nd of September, Hans Schmidt went to the apartment that they had rented while posing as a married couple. And with a 12-inch butter knife, he slashed... with a 12-inch butcher's knife, he slashed Anna's throat while she slept, drank her blood, raped her as she bled to death, sawed off her head with a hacksaw, sawed the rest of her body in half, carefully wrapped each section of her body in a newspaper dated from the 31st of August, put her lower body into one of her pillowcases that had a neatly monogrammed A on it, and attached large pieces of grey-green schist or rocks to each section. But it does not stop there, because he then took the pieces of Anna Mueller's body and dumped them in the Hudson River in hope that the schist he had gathered in Manhattan would help the parts of their body sink to the bottom. And then, so as not to arouse any suspicion, Hans Schmidt returned to St. Joseph's Church, offered Mass, and administered Holy Communion as though nothing had happened. After 3 days, 2 kids on the New Jersey side of the Hudson came across the upper torso of Anna Mueller's body, and 3 miles further downriver in Weehawken, New Jersey, the lower section of her body was also found, with it still being wrapped in the pillowcase with the schists or rocks tied to it. The Hudson County police detectives, whilst doing a general inspection of the body bits, found that there was a price tag still attached to the pillowcase that had the aforementioned neatly monogrammed A. And even though the body was found in New Jersey, the evidence was given to the New York Police Department, mainly because the schist that was originally used to weigh the body down was the type of rock that was extremely rare in New Jersey, but commonplace in Manhattan. So the investigation was then assigned to the Manhattan Chief of Detectives, a man called Joseph Farrow, at the New York City Police Department. Using the aforementioned price tag, the pillowcase was eventually traced back to a factory in Newark, New Jersey, which sold exclusively to the Manhattan furniture dealer George Sachs. After the police arrived at George Sachs's furniture store at 27828 8th Avenue, Inspector Joseph Farrow found that the dealer was unfortunately unable to recall how many of these particular pillowcases he had sold. However, after a thorough check through his receipts, the dealer revealed that a bed spring, a mattress, pillows and pillowcases had indeed been sold on the 26th of August 1913. The receipts also revealed that the original buyer had given his name as a Mr. A. Van Dyke, and that he had arranged for his purchases to be delivered to a third-storey apartment at 68 Bradhurst Avenue. Meanwhile, an autopsy of the body parts told the New York Police Department that they were investigating the murder of a woman under 30, around 5 foot 4 inches tall, and between 120 and 130 pounds. Strangely enough, and at this stage of my research, I must admit I was, shall we say, a little perplexed. The autopsy also revealed that the woman had prematurely given birth shortly before she was murdered. Now, the question as to whether Anna Mueller was pregnant during her demise appears to have a mixed opinion, in that some websites online say that she was, and some say she wasn't. So I'll leave it up to you to decide, and as tragic as the story is, it doesn't really damage the plot at all. The building superintendent at 68 Bradhurst Avenue revealed to the New York Police Department that the flat was indeed occupied by a youngish married couple, with the husband being described as a man who had a heavy German accent that gave his name as H. Schmidt. So, as the said flat was already empty at the time of the New York City Police Department's arrival, it was decided to hold a stakeout. However, after 3 hours of staking out, as it were, no one was seen arriving or leaving the pad. So Inspector Joseph Farrow ordered the detective Frank Casasa to break into the apartment. A cursory search of the place found that the walls and floor were splattered with blood stains, despite there being a scrubbing brush along with 6 bars of soap by the sink. And on further inspection of the apartment, the detectives found that a butcher's knife along with a handsaw had been hidden inside of a trunk. And in another trunk, detectives found letters addressed to Anna Mueller, mentioning both the name Hans Schmidt and his employment at St. Joseph's Parish. In the second trunk, along with the letters, the detectives also found handkerchiefs with the same embroidered A as the pillowcases. When looking a little further into the apartment, the detectives found some men's clothing with the name A. Van Dyke sewn into the lining, along with some more letters in both German and English language addressed to Hans Schmidt. After this second short break, in part 3, we will look at the arrest and trial of Hans Schmidt, the evil priest, and other possible crimes that he may have committed.
Fright Nights was established in 1999 as the first company in the world to offer overnight ghost hunt experiences to the general public. pioneering paranormal events since the last century. Fright Nights operate at hundreds of the UK's most haunted and exclusive venues. All events have their own team of experienced paranormal investigators, mediums and psychics. They have a VIP members club for regular returning guests, offering loyalty discounts and exclusive invitation-only events. They can also host private events for your family and friends. You can contact them on 07852 998 628 or email them at office@frightnights.co.uk, or take a look at their website at www.frightnights.co.uk, where you can see the many locations they investigate and learn about them and the opportunities they have available. Hundreds of ghost hunters join Fright Nights every month for the most thrilling ghost hunting experiences they'll never forget. If you haven't been on a ghost hunt before, then why not join them to see what it's all about? Why not visit their social media sites for up-to-date information on all the places they visit and to see what's coming up in the future? They look forward to seeing you all soon. Fright Nights Ghost Hunting Events. Remember, only the original will do.
Many of the letters that were found in the apartment along with the clothing were from various women in Germany, but the biggest number of letters were from Anna Amula, whose most recent address was listed as 428 East 70th Street. So, Inspector Joseph Farrow and Detective Frank Casasa visited the aforementioned address, only to learn that Anna Amula had moved out of the premises after receiving a job offer as housekeeper at St Boniface's Church. And when our heroes then visited St Boniface's Church, they were told by the senior pastor, a Father John Braun, that Anna Amula had been his housekeeper, but she had transferred herself over to St Joseph's Church. Inspector Farrow, along with Detective Casasa, arrived at St Joseph's Rectory at around 1:30 p.m. They were then met at the front door of the rectory by the senior pastor, a Father Daniel Quinn, who then led them into the parlour and woke a very sleepy Hans Schmidt, because let's face it, killing someone must be a very tiring job. Upon being confronted by the inspector and the detective, Hans Schmidt admitted by saying, and I quote, "I killed her. I killed her because I loved her." And after his confession, Hans Schmidt then went on to describe not only the murder, but also the dismemberment of Anna Amula in great detail, after which, as his fellow priest watched in horror, he was taken into police custody. Following Hans Schmidt's arrest, the Archdiocese of New York, rather unsurprisingly, announced that Schmidt's priestly faculties had been indefinitely suspended. And, as you can probably imagine, the media spectacle that ensued was pretty huge, as the New York papers competed against each other with an ever greater degree of sensationalism regarding the case. During Hans Schmidt's first trial, he decided to plead not guilty by reasons of insanity, with his defence team accordingly using Schmidt's bisexuality, along with claims of hearing voices and that mental illness ran in his family, as proof of their client's psychosis. His defence team also decided to call the psychologist Smith Eli Jelliffe, who testified that Hans Schmidt's family tree showed up to 60 near or distant relatives who displayed signs of mental instability, and therefore he was too insane to be given the death penalty. However, the prosecution in the case called in various other witnesses, which included multiple alienists, or as they are now known today, psychologists, who had questioned Hans Schmidt before going to trial, with these alienists concluding that despite his claims of him hearing voices telling him to sacrifice Anna Mueller, he was indeed completely sane. Unfortunately, though, the prosecution's efforts were in vain, as the conclusion of the first trial in the December of 1913 was declared a hung jury. Approximately 2 weeks later, after the first trial, Hans Schmidt's second trial began. Only this time, the prosecution introduced some new testimony, of which would put a completely new twist on the whole case. In the April of 1913, well before Hans Schmidt received his alleged command from God to sacrifice Anna Schmidt, it appeared that he had convinced a fellow German immigrant, a woman called Bertha Zack, to pose as Anna Mueller and to purchase a $5,000 life insurance policy in Anna's name. And, surprise, surprise, the policy in question listed Hans Schmidt as the sole beneficiary. So, on the 5th of February 1914, after only 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Hans Schmidt guilty of first-degree murder. And, after being sentenced to the death penalty, he said, and I quote, "I'm satisfied with the verdict. I would rather die today than tomorrow." He was then sent to Sing Sing Prison, which is now known as the Sing Sing Correctional Facility in New York. At 5:50 a.m. on the 18th of February 1916, 2 years after his second trial, Hans Schmidt entered the Sing Sing death chamber, and moments before being seated in the electric chair, he said, and I quote, "I want to say one word before I go. I beg forgiveness of all I have offended or scandalized, and I forgive all who have offended against me." And just before the switch was thrown, Schmidt said in a muffled voice, and again I quote, "My last word is to say goodbye to all my dear old mother." A reporter from the Albany Times later wrote, and I quote,
"On his last night on earth, he spent proclaiming his innocence and declaring that he had made peace with God. The guards had expected a scene when the slayer was to be executed, but his actions surprised them. He was the coolest man in the death chamber. He almost domineered those who assisted in putting him to death."
He was pronounced dead at 5:58 a.m, and at the request of the Schmidt family in Germany, the location of his burial was kept as a secret. Although his victim, Anna Mueller, is buried in the Potter's Field at Hart Island in New York. So, what other possible crimes that our evil priest of darkness could he have committed? Well, it does appear that the authorities suspected Hans Schmidt of as many as 4 other murders, with one of them being the possible murder of a woman named Helen Green. Helen Green had originally left for Chicago a month before Anna Mueller's murder, but had then suddenly disappeared. with the police unable to find any traces of her. And another time was when Hans Schmidt moved to America and was seen with another woman who he claimed was his wife, but she suddenly disappeared as well. Hans Schmidt was also suspected to be involved in the deaths of 2 children, with the owner of the apartment complex where Schmidt was living at the time saying that she sometimes saw him bringing a 5-year-old boy to his living room. However, whenever he was questioned about the boy, Hans Schmidt claimed that he was his own son, and when the woman asked for the boy's name, he said that his name was August van Dyke. But, like all previously mentioned women in Hans' life, that boy has also disappeared. Hans Schmidt also became an alternate suspect in the murder of a 9-year-old girl named Alma Kellner, whose body was found buried in the basement of St. John's Church in Louisville, Kentucky, where he had worked. The 9-year-old girl's body had originally been burned. However, the authorities suspected the killer had tried to dismember her. In the end, it was the janitor, a Joseph Wendling, who was convicted and sentenced to life in prison for her murder based on circumstantial evidence. That and the bloody clothing that was found at his home. However, in 1935, upon the request of Alma Kellner's uncle, Joseph Wendling was pardoned and deported back to his home country of France. To this day, Hans Schmidt is the only Catholic priest to ever receive the highest punishment of execution in the United States.
Thank you all for taking the time out to listen to this episode of Mark's Unexplained World. In our next episode, show number 128, we're going to be looking at the Nahir Galaza case. This was an Argentine judicial process officially called Galaza Nahir Mariana, in which a 19-year-old girl named Nahir Mariana Galaza was convicted of murdering her 20-year-old boyfriend Fernando Pastorizo at dawn on the 29th of December 2017 in the city of Gualeguaychú, Entre Rios, Argentina, where they both lived. Galaza was sentenced to life imprisonment for homicide, which was aggravated by the fact that she and Pastorizo were under a stable relationship.
This show was written and researched by myself, Mark Hughes, and proofread and edited by Linda Hughes. The pronunciations of these silly names and places was all mine. The actors in this episode were Mark Hughes, Linda Hughes and Denise Poolar, with special thanks to Neil Packer and the staff at the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre in Hinckley. And, of course, a big thank you to everyone for listening. We never run out of ideas here at the office, otherwise known as Area 51, for Mark's Unexplained World podcast. But if you know of any other intriguing stories under the Unexplained banner, including ufology, hauntings, disasters, and any other sort of paranormal phenomena, as well as true crime, unsolved crime and missing people, just drop me a direct message and I will see what I can do. I will also include the name of the person who suggested the idea in the end credits of the podcast, if they're, of course, happy for me to do so. And again, just to add, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review and a thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel. And if you are listening on any other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. I thank you in advance. Mark's Unexplained World, because there's more to the paranormal than meets the third eye. And remember, guys, keep it real, because being real is better than being perfect. This show and all its contents are covered by basic copyright of Mark the Medium.